This is a school board workshop on Robert's Rules of Training, and the time is 1:30. First and foremost, I'd like to welcome back Mr. Barefoot. We missed you and hope you and your wife are doing well. And do you want to give us any update?
Not a lot of updates available. I'm happy to be back. It's been an interesting summer.
I bet it has. Okay, here in the room, we have Mr. Brian Barefoot, board member, Ms. Terry Barrenborg, board member, myself, Dr. Jones, chair, Dr. Moore, superintendent, and Mr. Ansbacher, our attorney, and Ms. Morey, our executive assistant. I'd like to welcome Ms. Proctor and let her have the floor at this time. Thank you very much.
Dr. Posca.
I'm sorry, Dr. Posca online, thank you. And I'd like to welcome Ms. Barbara Proctor, our trainer, and the floor is yours, Ms. Proctor. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for the opportunity to share with you the procedures and knowledge concerning Robert's Rules of Order. I know you guys have all heard of Robert's Rules of Order. I'm sure some of you may have a lot of questions. If you would like, is there anything before we start that you want to share with me that you want to be sure that we cover, or should I just go ahead and get started?
Board members, any questions before? No, just go ahead and get started. Dr. Posca, any questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay, during the presentation, at any time, if anyone has any questions, please interrupt me, raise your hand, so that all the answers are timely at the time that you actually have the question. This is a basic review of parliamentary procedure. It is based on the 12th edition of Roberts, which is the current edition. The goal behind any training in parliamentary procedure is to help individual leaders become individual members to become stronger leaders so that you have a better group, a better organization to make more informed decisions for your community. I love your logo, Stronger Together. That's fantastic. And I'd like to add Robert's Rules of Order to it because that will enhance you when it comes to making your decisions. A lot of people are afraid of Roberts and they don't understand the purpose and the history of why this parliamentary authority was written. This is a picture of Dogwood in 1876. 1876 is the year that Robert first published his book. And it's really a very interesting story because he was a West Point graduate. He was in the military during the Civil War. He was on the North Side. He was a civil engineer. He never faced battle against any of his relatives from Virginia. He's very notable for what he did at Galveston as far as protecting the city from the hurricanes and the floods when the storms come in. He lived California, Oregon, New York. Being in the military, he traveled everywhere. He was asked to conduct a meeting for his church one time. And he's like, well, what could be so hard about this? And he presided, and it was a nightmare. And the meeting went on for hours and hours and hours, and he was extremely embarrassed and upset that the meeting went so poorly. So he devoted his life to learning more about parliamentary procedure and what he could do to make things better. He studied the Greeks, which is their first written record of parliamentary procedure. And when you had the war with Athens, there's a 30-year treaty being broken. And they had their deliberations, and it's like, do we go to war? Do we not go to war? And they took a voice vote, and the person presiding insisted that people stand up and divide on either side of the room. So it was very clear who wanted to go to war and who didn't want to go to war. That's the first written record of a division of a decision made by a group of people. Parliamentary procedure evolved through the centuries. It became more perfected during the English Parliament, which is how we brought it to the United States. And then we have our own items that we've added to basic procedure that has evolved over the time. So you have common law, which is common parliamentary procedure that has evolved through the years. And what Roberts did is he researched all everybody's book that had been written, including Jefferson's Manual for Legislatures, and he adapted what he felt was most suitable for ordinary societies because nobody had any rules that everybody followed. If you recall from history, the Continental Congress, when they first met, spent several days just setting up the procedures that they were going to follow during their deliberations, because everyone from the 13 colonies came from different countries and different backgrounds and different religions and had different customs. And they had to come up with some kind of uniform procedure for them to just conduct a meeting. So that's what they did. And that's kind of sort of what Robert did. Robert reviewed all the different procedures and put them together in a book. Again, it was published in 1876. If you think about it, that was only 10 years after the Civil War. At the time his book was published, the North was still in control of the South. You still had federal troops in the South. And as you can see, Americans, like we are today, and we were then, we are a very diverse group of people that come from a lot of various different backgrounds. Our country was founded on diversity, and everybody has their own customs and their own rules for their own organizations. He had a hard time getting his book published. He had to agree to give away 1,000 copies. He paid for printing 4,000 copies. He gave 1,000 copies away, and he figured that the remaining 3,000 copies he could sell over the next 2 years. Well, guess what? He sold out in 4 months. Everybody was so hungry for a uniform set of rules. So it didn't matter what meeting they went to, what organization they went to. Everybody followed the same basic pattern of procedure in their meetings. And the convenience of having the same rules was very welcomed. But what was more important is these rules worked. They were able to take different personalities and different backgrounds and come up with a procedure or process for communicating during meetings that allowed everybody to communicate and to be a member. And, you know, we talked about DEIB. Roberts was the first DEIB advocate. D is for diversity. We still have the diversity now that we had more than 150 years ago. Equity, as soon as that meeting is called to order, everybody that is a member is equal. It doesn't matter what your background is, who you are, you're immediately, everyone's equal as soon as that gavel starts the meeting. I is for inclusiveness. Meetings do better when people are invited and encouraged and engaged to participate, to share their feelings, to share their thoughts, to share their ideas and debate. And that creates the inclusiveness. And the B is for belonging. If you belong to an organization where you feel welcome to the meetings, people listen to what you have to say during debate, and they consider your position and the alternative options when they vote to make a decision, everybody feels like they belong, they feel like they're united, and they're working together towards a common goal. Everybody doesn't expect to win every time, but the idea that you are equitable, you have equal vote, you have the equal right to attend the meetings, to speak and debate, to make motions, and to vote makes you feel like you belong, you're included, and everything is equitable and you're being treated fairly. And that's what people want in life. They want to be treated fairly, they want to be listened to. And Robert's Rules helps organizations do this with their members. I have seen, today, school board, that's what we're going to be talking about. The school board, you guys said it eloquently. school boards set the tone and the culture for the school districts they're elected to govern. The school board of the school district of Indian Ridge County aims to foster and maintain a high degree of trust among its members, instructional and staff support, and the community. These protocols are designed to ensure the needs and interests of students are kept primarily in all decision-making. You all voted this, you guys all agreed upon this, and this is your common goal that holds you together and the purpose of you guys meeting and making decisions. When we talk about Robert's Rules of Order, training, and it just takes very little training to make a huge difference. It helps members become leaders. And when you have better leaders, you're going to have better organizations, and they're going to make better decisions for their community. What we're going to cover today, it's used in the schools. The school boards use parliamentary procedure. The School Nutrition Association, your cafeteria workers use parliamentary procedure. Your unions use parliamentary procedure. Your students, if they belong to FFA, Future Farmers of America, or FBLA, which is your Future Business Leaders, or HOSA, all these student groups use parliamentary procedure, and they have training in parliamentary procedure, and the students even compete at the state, local, state, national level concerning parliamentary procedure. So all these organizations follow these same rules. Your religious organizations, your professional groups, your attorneys, your CPAs, your nurses, youth groups we just talked about. The Boy Scouts now even have a merit badge for parliamentary procedure. Government boards and entities, city councils, these rules can be applied to small groups, boards, committees like you all, or larger meetings, or even conventions. A lot of people say, well, the book is too fat, it's too big, it's too hard to read. It's because in this one book, it has all the basic procedures that you would use or could use in all these different types of organizations and meetings. Another group is your civic groups. I'm sure most of the school board members belong to other organizations that have meetings. And, you know, hopefully they use Roberts and they have good meetings and they have good leaders. If they don't, they need help, they can use Roberts. Roberts is not a weapon. If anything, it's a shield to protect. It protects the rights of individual members to be heard. It protects the right of the majority to decide, and it treats people fairly. So, you know, this is very valuable. The fact that, you know, most people don't get formal training in parliamentary procedure. They learn through example. They learn how to conduct their meetings by watching you guys conduct your meetings. So when you have meetings and you don't follow parliamentary procedure, or people are not treated fairly, people think, oh, that's okay. They did it, we can do it too. And you have a bad situation. So I do encourage you to do your best to try and follow the procedures in Roberts. They're not hard, they're very simple. You just have to know what they are and make the determination that you want to follow these procedures. Again, if you have any questions, please interrupt me, because I will go on talking forever. I used to teach and I could talk for 3 hours. At college, I taught 3 hours, and what I did, I made a deal with my students. It's like if we skip the break, class would only be 2 hours instead of, you know, two and a half hours instead of 3 hours. So I'm used to talking, so please interrupt me. Okay, when we talk about Robert's rules, we're talking about what are small board procedures according to Roberts. And again, a lot of people are afraid of Roberts. It's like, what are you afraid of Roberts for? All he says is you have an agenda. You follow your agenda. One person speaks at a time. The person that's presiding is a person that recognizes the one person that has a right to speak, and you have the right to speak without being interrupted, unless you're doing something that's against the rules or against decorum and debate. And one motion is considered at a time. This keeps you focused on one item at a time. You finish what you're doing before you go on to the next item of business. In small boards, Roberts allows informal discussion without a motion. In larger meetings, when you have 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 people, Roberts recommends that you have a motion first, so everybody knows what motion is being debated. And then the chair states the motion again before you take a vote, so you know every motion being voted on. I recommend to school boards to follow more formal procedure when it comes to motions, because if you know what the motion is, you know exactly what's being discussed and what you're voting on. If you don't take the time for someone to frame a motion by using the words, I move to, and then whatever the motion is, people might have a different conception of what the motion is that's finally adopted. So even though you're not required to, I do urge you to actually make an official motion so everybody knows exactly what they're voting on and there's no confusion later. In small boards, there's no limits on the number of times a member may speak, although you can limit the length of each speech. Robert's basic rule is every member has a right to speak 2 times for 10 minutes on every motion. And if you all did that, your meetings would last weeks or days instead of just hours. Many organizations adopt special rules of procedure, and you have, when it comes to your public comments, you limit them, I believe, to 1 speech for 3 minutes. Some people do 2 minutes, 3 minutes is easier. But as far as board members, there's no limit on the number of times a board member may speak. You can limit it to a certain length of minutes, 2-3 minutes. The reason you do this is if one board member speaks for 10 minutes, the other board members don't have a chance to speak at all. If you limit one person's speech to 3, 4, 5 minutes, at the end of that time, another school board member would have the opportunity to speak. So you don't have one person taking up all the meeting time. So you do want to alternate debate. You do want to give an opportunity for other people to speak and not just 1 or 2 people. A member who has not spoken should be recognized before a member who has already spoken. Again, the purpose of this is to allow as many people as possible to have an opportunity to share their thoughts and debate before you take a vote. The chair may make motions, participate in debate, and vote. This is a small board procedure. This is something that is also very common when you have your condo board of directors and your HOA board of directors and your city commissioners. Because it's a small board, the chair may make motions, participate, debate, and vote. When you have, again, 20, 30, 40, 50 people, it's more important for the chair to remain impartial in public by not participating in debate, because you want all the members. The president is appointed or elected to represent all the members, not just a certain group. And so the chair needs to be more careful about appearing impartial. If you belong to a large group and you're presiding and you cannot participate in debate or make a motion, what you do is you just put on a piece of paper and give it to a friend and have them do it. It's too easy to keep your impartiality and have someone else make the motion. The chair does have the right to vote in larger organizations when the vote is going to affect the outcome. A basic premise in our democracy is a majority decides. So if you have a tie vote, do you have a majority? No. So a tie vote, the motion is lost. So the chair can vote to make or create a tie if they have not already voted. The chair can only vote 1 time. Decisions, we just said, made by majority. And when we talk about a majority, it's a majority of those present and voting. The school board, and we'll have to ask the attorney, I'm sure there's a law that says every school member has to vote that's present. And I don't know if they assume if they don't vote, they voted yes, or if they don't vote, they voted no. Probably if they don't vote, they voted yes. but it depends upon what the local statute says for the state. Every state is different.
Can you
A very
hear me?
common mistake is when people say majority is more than half.
Ms. Proctor, our attorney has a statement.
Does someone have a hand?
Yes, ma'am. This is the attorney. I met you beforehand. In answer to your question, in Florida, a collegial, a political subdivision of the state, the board member must vote unless there is a conflict of interest or other exception. There aren't too many exceptions.
Okay, and so if someone abstains and doesn't vote, do they assume they voted yes? Or do they assume they voted no?
If they don't vote, they actually are supposed to write a note on a form that explains why they're not voting. And it's supposed,
Okay.
and typically that would be because of a direct conflict of interest precluding their voting.
Okay,
Otherwise, they
thank
are
you.
supposed to vote.
Okay, thank you. So, okay, so you have a 5-member board. If one person doesn't vote because they have a conflict, does that mean it's a majority of 4 or is it still a majority of 5?
It would be a majority of the quorum, so it would be 3 regardless.
Okay. All right, thank you. So sometimes, and if you look in the statutes, it might say majority is more than half. Majority is more than half according to Roberts. Sometimes in the statutes, it might say 50% plus 1. And if it says 50% plus 1, that is not more than half. So if you have a 9-person board, more than half would be 4.5 people, would be 5. If you said majority plus 1, well, majority is 5 plus 1 is 6. So if they define something as 50 plus 1, that changes the outcome, or could change the outcome of a majority. The other thing, and again, this is something you don't have to deal with because you're required to vote unless there's a conflict, but I know you guys belong to other organizations, and if people, members, have the right to vote, but they're not obligated to vote under normal situations in a normal not-for-profit ordinary situation. If you have abstentions, they are ignored. So if you have 100 people present at a meeting and only 50 people vote, it'd be a majority of 50, it'd be 26. It's not a majority of 100 because you had 100 people present. So abstentions are ignored unless there's a rule or a law that says a majority of everyone present, and then it's everyone present and the abstentions do count. But normally it's a majority of whoever votes. So if you don't vote, it's like saying, I don't care who wins, I agree with whoever the majority is. Okay, members shall address our remarks through the chair. And I've watched a lot of your meetings. I did not watch every meeting. And I want to say that I do hear people say, I have a question through the chair, or these remarks are through the chair. Whenever you have a remark, you always address it to the chair. And if it's something that's really directed to another member, you still address the other member by addressing the chair directly. Roberts keeps everything in the third person. Robert keeps everything impersonal. It's not personal. It's third party. If you have something to say, you don't name the other member. You say the school board member or the other school board member, something. You don't name people. You do not make it personal. When you are debating a motion, all remarks should concern the merits, the motion that's on the floor, whether you should vote yes or whether you should vote no. The remarks should not attack the motives of any other members, and this will help keep you out of trouble. The remarks must be germane, is the official word, to the subject or the motion. Members should avoid attacking other members' motives, the motion or topic. not the member, is the subject of the debate or discussion. Okay, when you adopt Robert's rules and you don't like what Robert says, you adopt what's called special rules of order. And if you were a board and you adopted Roberts, I would strongly suggest that you adopt a special rule of order that says all motions must be seconded. Roberts does say in board meetings, you don't have to second a motion, but when it comes to a school board meeting or county commissioner meeting, it's very important to have a second because you want to prevent any one person from wasting the time of the meeting considering a motion that only that one person wants to consider. So it's very important to have a rule, adopt a rule of order. It's called special rule of order that supersedes Roberts. Motions must be seconded. The purpose of a second is not to say that you agree with the motion. You do not have to agree with the motion to make a second. All the second does is to ensure that at least two people want to take the time during your meeting to discuss that motion. That's why a second is very important. And the other rule would be that, and you guys do this, voting shall be by roll call, raising hands, voice, or polling. You have a specific method of voting. Some people use voice vote because it's only 5 people. Other people go through the exercise of launching a poll and having the 5 people vote by poll. It's up to your board and how you want to conduct your business. That's another thing Robert says. Every organization has a right to make their own decisions as long as you follow proper procedure. I see a hand raised. Did you have a question or a comment?
Hi, yes, I did. Thank you so much for the information. I actually had a question about something that you mentioned earlier on, regard to someone not voting.
Okay, there's a very bad echo. Do you want to talk a little slower so that I can hear?
Yeah, can the CEC mute your camera or audio? That's where the feedback is coming. No. Can the CEC mute your audio? Okay. That's where the feedback is coming from. Okay, thank you. Yes, Barbara, thank you so much. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
It actually was a question regarding the vote of, it was a question that you asked earlier. We had this conversation quite a while with a previous attorney who confirmed that if you are silent during a vote, at least in Florida, if you're silent, if you don't vote, it is considered a yes. You have to actually say no in order for it to be considered no. Of course, with the exception of, having a conflict of interest. Apart from that, if you're silent and you don't say yay or nay, it's considered yay.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's what I thought, but I'm not an attorney, and so I would never interpret Florida statutes, but that's what I heard as well, too. Okay, well, thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments? I mean, this is very basic procedure. And Roberts is very basic. A lot of people are afraid of Roberts, and I'm always like, what are you afraid of? And I start going through the procedures. It's like, well, yes, we have an agenda, and yes, only one person speaks at a time.
Yes, Ms. Berenborg
So,
has a question. Ms. Berenborg, thank you.
go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that you suggested 3, 4, or 5 minutes for a board member to speak. Right now, we have adopted a procedure for 8 minutes. And I always feel like sometimes that's a little too long because when somebody's speaking, you might think of something as, what they're saying spurs something that you're thinking, oh, okay, I have a question about that. But by the time it comes around to you, It's way past what it was. To have not a one-sided conversation, but a lively discussion among the group, I like the fact that you suggested we change it to 3, 4, or 5 minutes. Is that what you suggest?
I'm suggesting that you guys follow your own rules and that you follow them consistently. And if you feel like 8 minutes is too long, you need to have a motion to amend to strike out 8 and insert 5 and take a vote, because that is a decision that you have to make for yourselves.
Okay, thank you.
Any other-
I think the biggest issue I notice, and I do a lot of school boards, I do like one a month. They don't consistently follow their own rules. That's the biggest
Yep.
thing I notice with school boards.
Any
Okay, so if you want to change that rule, fine, just make a motion to amend, debate it, and vote. And it's up to a majority of your members what they want to do as far as rules for debate. Some people say it's a special rule of order that requires a 2/3 vote. Because it's a small board, I would say that would only require a majority vote.
All right, any other questions? Okay, thank you, Ms. Proctor. Go ahead, thank you.
Okay, next item on our agenda is governing documents. And you all know this. You have to follow state laws. And I don't know which section of Florida statute pertains to school boards. I have read it in the past. I know it's the superintendent is responsible for preparing the agenda and for getting the notice out and for doing the minutes. You have federal laws, and you are very much aware of what the federal laws are that you must comply with. And you have local laws. And then, depending on the type of school board you are, some school boards have charters. And I think that's where you get the name charter schools. A charter is issued to a school, giving them authorization to exist. In Florida, in the states, you have corporations, you have for-profit corporations, you have not-for-profit corporations. They would have articles of incorporations in the state of Florida that you would have to follow. And some schools, and I don't know if your school district does or not, have a constitution or bylaws. I know when you talk about charter schools and independent schools, they have their own boards and they have constitutions and bylaws that they have to abide by. Hopefully your bylaws or whatever rules you have adopted, adopt your parliamentary authority as Roberts. Again, if you don't like what Roberts says, you can adopt special rules of order. And these special rules of order supersede what Roberts says. You have standing rules. These are administrative rules. And it could be that with your school board that the standing rules are adopted by the superintendent because they have to do with administration. Or it could be that the school board has certain administrative matters, like what do you have to do to get an item on the agenda. Those would be called standing rules. They're administrative rules. So rules of order deal with parliamentary procedure. Standing rules deal with administrative procedures. And then we all know about custom. Custom is like saying we've always done it that way. If custom doesn't conflict with anything, you follow your custom. If custom conflicts with a federal law or state law or your bylaws or special rule of order or parliamentary authority, you follow the written law. The custom falls to the ground. You follow the written law. If you want to go back to what the custom was, then you adopt a special rule of order or a standing rule that incorporates that custom into a written rule. So this is the hierarchy of the documents that govern your organization. The federal laws are the highest and the custom would be the lowest. Does anyone have any questions? All right, that's pretty basic.
Yeah.
All right, now meetings. And we all know school board members are elected officials. And we know that the Florida law requires public notice of meetings that includes the agenda items. And the agenda typically includes a consent calendar. Some school boards get confused because they make a motion to adopt the agenda that's prepared by the superintendent. If you make the motion to adopt it and you officially adopt it, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. If you want to amend the agenda the superintendent prepared, that's the time that you would do it. But what happens is some people treat adopting the agenda for the meeting the same as adopting the consent calendar. And this is where you have a mistake that's made. When you have an agenda that's on the floor and you remove an item from the agenda, that item is quote unquote removed from the agenda and you cannot bring it back during that meeting. So if you have an item on the agenda and you remove it and people leave, you can't trick them and bring it back and have it considered later on at the same meeting. When you remove an item from the agenda, it's gone for the rest of that meeting. A consent calendar is different. When you have a consent calendar, this is a list of routine motions that you don't want to spend a lot of time debating. So you put them on consent calendar, and before you adopt the consent calendar, the presiding officer is going to give every member an opportunity to remove any item from the consent calendar. When you remove an item from the consent calendar, that just means that that one item is going to be considered separately. And they are considered separately in the order that they are removed. And that once those items are removed, then you take a vote to adopt a consent calendar, and then you consider each of the items that have been removed separately. The public at school board meetings and city commission meetings has the right to make comments. The school board members get to decide when the comments were made. You decide if it's on agenda items only or not. Different school boards do different things. How many times a member can speak? Usually it's one time per agenda item, and for how long? You guys do 3 minutes. People seem to be okay with 3 minutes. I've seen people do for 2 minutes, and they seem to always go over the 2-minute limit. So 3 is probably better than 2. It's very important to have this public opportunity to make comments. 1, because it's in compliance with Florida law and the Florida statutes, and 2, because this is the only time where the public has an opportunity to let the school board members know what their issues are, what their problems are, or what they're facing, and they need your help. This is where you communicate with the general public. We have workshop sessions, which is what we have today. It's very important to note that during a workshop session, you should not take any votes. This is for public, this is for your information to get a better understanding whatever is going to be considered at the meeting. It's for information. You should never take any votes at a workshop session. And again, some school board members try and bully other members by forcing votes at workshop sessions. Do not let them do that. Do not participate in that. Workshop sessions are for information only. Decisions are to be made at the meetings. And that's it. Any questions about agendas, meetings, consent calendars, workshop sessions?
I have one. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. You made a statement, said that's the only time that people from the public can come talk to us about whatever they want to talk to us about that we're voting on. Actually, it's not. They can also contact us through email or call us. So I just want to make that statement. But I get what you're saying. It's the only time they can say it to all of us at the same time. So I get that part.
Right, right. And that, okay, again, I am not an attorney. But if someone sends you a private email, that's not in the Sunshine Law. I mean, nobody else gets to have that input. And one very important aspect about Roberts is when you have debate should occur during a meeting.
Right.
Don't debate things outside a meeting. You don't make decisions outside a meeting.
You don't.
Roberts is supposed to be simultaneous communication. And that is where we have a lot of, nuances. We're trying to figure this out with the new technology because you have virtual meetings. Is virtual meeting simultaneous communication where we can see you and hear you? Or do you have to be in person to have that simultaneous communication? And that's an ongoing debate that we're not going to get into today. But when people send individual emails to individual board members, that's not really helpful in everyone having the same information and making decisions. It's better to attend the meeting and speak during the meeting so everybody hears what you have to say.
No, I was just trying to clarify that because you made a statement that that's the only time that they can address their concerns with a board member. However, our emails are also subject to, our emails are also subject to sunshine.
Have a private conversation. I mean, we live in a free country, thank goodness.
Right.
We can have meetings and assemble and do that. But official debate happens during meetings. It does not happen by emails.
Right. I just want to make that clarification because you specifically said that's the only time they can contact us. The other thing is, under state law, I just finished my ethics training, and the attorneys here in Florida stated that there's no statutory right to allow non-agenda items to be spoken about at our board meetings. And, there's been some debate that some board members want to kind of quell that or move it to the end of the meeting or whatever. And, there have been an attack of First Amendment rights. But the law says in Florida that there's no statutory right to allow non-agenda items to be spoken about. Only agenda items is what the board needs to hear about in order to make a vote, because we're not voting on the others. However, I do think it's important for somebody to bring to our attention something that's not on the agenda. So I just wanted to point out that there's a statutory distinguishing between those two things.
Right.
Any other board member question?
There's
Okay.
a hand raised.
Yeah, I do, but I would let Barbara answer that question first.
Yeah, again, I'm not an attorney. I'm not going to interpret statute. Some school boards allow non-agenda items to be discussed by the public. The school board has the right to decide what they want to allow or not allow, as long as they are in compliance with what the law states.
Thank you. Ms. Rosario?
So, so I think the question here is, what is non-agenda?
Can we have that echo again? I don't know how you stopped it last time.
How about now? Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. So I think the question here is, what is a non-agenda item? Because anything that is on the agenda is an agenda item. The only thing that is not on the agenda might be something that we as a board during the adoption of the orders of the day may want to add an item. Maybe we want at the meeting to add an item to an action or to a discussion, for example, because we only have 3 sections, right? We have consent, we have action, and then we have discussion items. So if we have consent items, those are typically your, regular routine items. Action items are items where we are voting on, as you well know. I'm only saying this for anybody in the public who's listening. And then discussion items are anything that we want to discuss as a board member. So my thought is anything that is a non-agenda item would be anything that we want to add during the adoption of the orders of the day that have not been on the printed, posted agenda. Can you talk to that, Barbara, please?
Well, the only comment I have to say is you have to be sure and consult with your attorney, because some items require previous notice.
Well, items that
if an item requires previous notice, you have to give notice, and the only thing you could do at this meeting is to give notice that the next meeting you want something to be on the agenda. But again, I'm not an attorney. I don't know what requires notice, what doesn't require notice. And I'm sure your attorney attends your meetings. The attorney can assist you. And if ever something came up that should have been noticed that was not noticed, the attorney would bring that to your attention.
Yeah. So we could add anything by statute. We've had this conversation. We can add anything to the agenda, board members, all board members. But according to the statute, and of course, I don't mind if the attorney kind of chimes in here if I say anything wrong. If the item is considered a controversial item, we should preserve the right to hold that item so that we can give the public enough time to have that item be, formally put on an agenda, and then, sort of not put in anything of controversy that evening, because we're not giving the public an opportunity to speak to it.
Right. Yeah. And see, that's where, Roberts, when you talk about Robert's Rules of Order, most people are talking about it generically. And it applies to your Kiwanis clubs. It applies to your sororities, your fraternities, whatever. And they have on the item of business, we call it Mrs. Sun. You have the minutes, approval, reports of officers, boards, and standing committees, reports of special committees, special orders, which is something the bylaws or statutes require you to do at this meeting, unfinished business, and general orders. Unfinished business is any business that was not reached at the last meeting or a motion that might have been pending when the last meeting adjourned. I don't know if you guys ever have unfinished business. And then you have general orders, which is any motion postponed from the last meeting, and new business, where you can bring up new business. And Roberts, when you have new business, you have to have a motion first, so everyone knows what is being discussed and voted on. Roberts also has what's called good of the order, which sounds to me like your discussion, where you just have general comments about, whatever's going on, good or bad, without having a motion pending. With Roberts, the only time you have discussion without a motion is under good of the order. And then you have a program perhaps, and then you have your adjournment. But school boards meetings, city council meetings are special, just like your condo meetings and your HOA meetings. The Florida legislature recently adopted a law saying that your condo and HOA meetings notices must now include the agenda. And there's always a discussion about new business. If the agenda includes new business, can you have new business, or does it have to be noticed? And that's a question that I always tell them to ask their attorney, because different attorneys will give you different opinions. In school boards, it's a lot more clear.
I just have one comment, Barbara.
So whatever the attorney says regarding notice is what you need to follow, because it's the attorney that's going to defend you if there's a problem. Okay, motions.
Just one question, Barbara. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Be prepared.
Hello, can you hear me? Sorry.
If someone has
Yes,
questions.
I'm sorry. This is Dr. Jones. We've talked a little bit about this in our protocols and also in policy. Adding an action item the night of the board meeting does not give unless it's an emergency or for good cause, that's in our policy, does not give, the board time to prepare, let alone the public, to say anything regarding the debate. So, several times we'll have discussion items added at the board meeting, which is great. But as far as an action item where the board would vote, the chair has the right to determine whether that's good cause, and usually good cause means if we don't do it now, something, will happen. So that's how ours will read.
Okay, very good. And, for like a condo or HOA, after a hurricane, you have emergency meetings and you don't have time to give the proper notice. And the first motion I suggest people adopt is, I move that this be considered an emergency. Action has to be taken tonight. And then once you establish the fact that you have an emergency situation, then you take up that motion. But that's a two-step process. And if you do it in one step, that's fine. We will talk about voting. You have voice votes, raising hand, rising votes, and you have what's called unanimous consent. The chair can say, without objection, we will do something. And unless someone says, I object, everyone consented to whatever action is being proposed. That's not something I would recommend for school boards because you have a record of how people voted. It's always a very interesting thing. In debate, some people say, why don't you include debate in the minutes? It's like, well, in debate, people can say whatever people want to say in debate. It doesn't really matter what they say in debate. It matters how they vote. And school boards, to my knowledge, have to keep a record of how people vote on main motions at meetings. So it's probably advisable not to use unanimous consent. But if ever the chair does something and nobody says I object, the only reason you would say I object is you're objecting to the fact that they're taking action without taking an official vote. You're not objecting to the action being taken. You're only objecting to the fact that a vote wasn't being taken. You just say I object, and it forces the chair to actually take an official vote. Any other questions?
I think we're good.
Yeah, I had
Oh,
another
sorry.
question. So we don't have anywhere written where our chair makes that ruling. That's been the recent practice, where the chair would say, let's say, just hypothetically speaking, a board member during the opening of a meeting makes a motion to add an item to the action agenda. So from what I understand, traditionally, what has been accepted in for Robert's rules is that once that gavel, because that gavel hits and the board meeting becomes the meeting for all of the board members, that it's up to all of the board members to make that decision as to whether an item can be added to the action for a vote. The action agenda for a vote. Whereas what has been recently practiced is that the board chair solely wants to make that decision. It's my understanding that that is not the position of the board chair, that is the position of the board corporate.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, and that it's a very common thing that happens. And me being a parliamentarian and trained in Robert's rules, I'd probably be very guilty of doing a lot of stuff by unanimous consent. And you do have, and I'm not saying this is the case, but it can lead to a presiding officer having too much control. And Roberts is a balance of the rights of the individual member and of the assembly. So if the chair is doing anything without taking a vote, any member can just say, I object, and it forces a vote to be taken.
So there's
And,
no discussion at that point, Barbara? If a
no-
board member says, I object.
Okay, as soon as you say I object, the chair has to put it to vote. Shall the agenda be amended to add this action item? And it would take either majority vote, 2/3 vote, whatever you guys practice.
Okay.
2/3 of 5, I guess, is the same as majority of 5. It's 3, right?
Yes, 3 is our majority.
Okay. So, yeah, and and it's not personal. And this is one problem people need to understand. Parliamentary procedure is not personal. If anything, it protects the individual. So if the presiding officer is doing something and someone says, I object, all they're saying is, let's take a vote. It's nothing against anybody. Just like if someone says point of order, it's not a personal confrontation. It's like, hey, I think we might have violated some rules. Let's step back. Or I need to know what motion we're voting on or what motion is being discussed. Or could the chair repeat the motion so we know exactly what we're doing? It's not personal. And that's where a lot of people get upset because they don't understand. There's a reason it's in third person. You say point of order, the chair says the member will state the point. You don't say your point, it's the point of order. And you just say, this motion is not debatable, or this requires a 2/3 vote, whatever point of order you have to say. It's not personal. My favorite, and I usually tell people at the beginning of a training session, I forgot to tell you, is when Barbara wanders off topic and you want to get back to the agenda, all you have to do is say, I call for the orders of the day. And when you say, I call for the orders of the day, that means the presiding officer needs to go back to whatever is on the agenda and state whatever motion is on the floor. We need to get back to business. So if I start wandering on a story, just say, I call for the orders of the day. And again, it's not personal. Sometimes when you're presiding, people don't realize how hard it is to preside. I've trained students, high school, middle school students, adults, college students in parliamentary procedure for competitions. And I make every student practice presiding, because when you practice presiding, you realize how hard it really is to pay attention to what's going on and make sure you don't skip something. It's good to have a script and read from your script so you don't skip anything. And that's why you have your attorney there to say, point of order, or interrupt and say, I believe you skipped something. And when it comes to the rules, it's up to all the members to enforce the rules. So if you have any one member trying to do something and it's not proper procedure, every member has the responsibility of saying point of order. And the chair would say, state the point, and you just say, that's not on the agenda for this time. That needs to come up under something else on the agenda or something. It's not personal. So any other comments or questions before we move on?
Yeah, I just wanted to just kind of reiterate, we have had in the past where a board member has said point of order or, something to that effect, and it has been ignored. Or, the chair, of course, nothing personal, would say, well, I don't believe so, and we're going to continue the conversation. Or, I just don't want point of order right now. Let's hear one other person speak, and so I'm glad that you're bringing this up, because when a board member says point of order, it should be adhered to.
Okay, well, sometimes members make points of orders and the point is not well taken because whatever they're trying to say is wrong is really right. So, it just depends. It depends on the situation and what's going on. But if something happens and a member says point of order and the chair rules against the item, whatever it happens to be, we'll pretend like it's an action item. If there's no objection, we're going to take up this action item that wasn't on the agenda. I object. The chair doesn't want to take a vote. Well, someone said, I object, say point of order, someone objected, we have to take a vote. The chair could say, well, we don't want to take a vote. Someone else needs to say point of order, or I appeal from the decision of the chair. It's not one person's right to enforce the rules, it's everybody's right. And it's everybody's responsibility. And if you don't, you're allowing that one person to bully the other people. And that's where, it's not one person, it's everybody's responsibility to enforce the rules that you guys adopted. I didn't make up these rules, you adopted these rules. And if you're going to follow them, you need to follow them uniformly, because you have to remember, you're setting the example for your students. You're setting the example for your teachers and your employees. And if you don't follow your own rules, how can you expect them to follow your rules? So it's very important to follow your rules. If someone does something wrong, it happens. We're humans. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not intentional. Let's say err on the side of good, it's not intentional. The chair says something wrong, you say, I appeal from the decision of the chair. And then that forces the members to take a vote on whether or not to do whatever is supposed to be done.
Yes, ma'am, just a couple comments.
Go
As a
ahead.
residing chair right now, if a point of order is taken and I say it's well taken, we move forward with that point of order, or not well taken, then obviously the person can object and appeal it to the board, then I take a vote, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And one thing, just for
Yeah.
your information, I'm finding the policy on good cause, but when we did our protocols, we worked very, very hard on that. But it does say that if at all possible, don't do an action item the night of the board meeting or during the board meeting. And I know it all goes to the board members and they can do that. But one of the main reasons is so our public is aware we're taking a vote. The superintendent may need to get information on the vote. So when I look at good cause, I always thought that it would be something, is this an emergency? Do we have to do it now? But I understand you said we have to go to a vote. So I'll look that up in our policy, and thank you.
Yeah, it's in Roberts. I mean, you just say point of order, state your point. It's well taken, not well taken. And if the members disagree, they have the right to appeal.
Yes,
And it takes the power from the one person presiding and gives it to all the members.
correct.
And it's a very common procedure. And again, it's all procedural stuff.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Okay, so motions, be prepared. Know what motions are available. Know when to make the right motion and know the words to make the right motion. I don't know how much training you have on parliamentary procedure. Typically, board members, elected officials, the only training they have might be from their executive committee meetings, maybe from their civic organizations, maybe the professional organization, but most people don't have a lot of training in proper parliamentary procedure. And when you do become elected, it's worth taking the time to train the board members to know what motions are available, know when to make it, and know the words. I do not want to make you into experts in parliamentary procedure. That's like a year study of, all the rules and all the procedures and what to follow. But I do think it's very important to go through the basic procedures. And you all know this, and I want to say for the most part, you follow this. You address the presiding officer, you wait for recognition, you make the motion by saying, I move. Now, like I said, I watched some of your meetings, not all of your meetings, and I don't mean this to be critical, but it helps to have good examples to demonstrate what could have been done to have made things better. You had a sometime this year, maybe it was 9 months ago, something about policies. You had like 3 policies. You're talking about getting rid of a policy. And there's a lot of debate about, well, should we get rid of this? Should we not get rid of this? Should we conform them? Blah, 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 blah. And rather than have all the debate, and I realize the value of debate, someone could have said, I move to instruct, and I don't know who it would be, if it'd be the attorney or the superintendent or a staff member, to review these policies, rewrite them into one policy, and to present them to the board for consideration. So, and this again happens at a lot of meetings. You go to meetings, condo meetings, HOA meetings, union meetings. People sit there and all they do is complain and talk about stuff, and they talk and talk and talk and talk, and the meeting's over with and nothing was happened. No action was taken because no one made a motion. If you said, I move, that's a motion, and you have to have a second to show at least 2 people are interested. That's how action gets taken. So if someone had made a motion to instruct someone to combine these policies into one, or to review them and make recommendations to the board, that would have been an action item that you could have taken a vote on for someone to do something. So sometimes you need to actually make the motion by saying, I move to get things done. The chair should always restate the motion by saying it is moved and seconded. That is present tense. And then you repeat the motion so everybody knows exactly what motion is being discussed. Then the chair will say, are you ready for question, or is there any debate? If someone says, are you ready for the question? That is the formal way of asking for debate. And a lot of people don't like it. They say it's archaic wording. But what the chair is really asking is, are you ready to vote on the question now? Or do you want to debate it? Or do you want to make some other motion? Because people don't like that phrase, are you ready for the question? They just say, is there any debate? When you ask for debate, that's the time you can make other motions, like a motion to amend. Then you have your debate. When you speak in debate, and I'm not going to go into this in depth, but basically, it's good to say, I speak in favor of the motion, or I speak against the motion, and then you give your reasons why, and then you finish by saying, I urge members to vote yes, or I urge members to vote no. So many times in debate, it's hard to figure out if the person is speaking in favor of the motion or if they're speaking against the motion. And they might have some great debate with some great reasons, but you forgot which way they want you to vote. So it's always good to start out with your position so people pay attention to what you're saying, and then wrap up with how you want them to vote. Decorum in debate, we already talked about, you address all your remarks to the chair. And the next comment I have is more so with the general public. It's good that you have things set up so as people stand at the mic, they're looking at the board members, they're looking at the chairman, which is good. What happens, and I haven't noticed it in your meetings as much as some others, the person standing at the podium keeps twitching and turning because they keep wanting to turn around and address the public. And they don't understand that the debate is being directed to and through the chair and not to the general public. And they don't realize that when they twist and turn, people are paying more attention to their body language. They're not listening to what the person is saying because they're seeing them twist and turn. They think, what in the world is going on? And when someone finally does turn their back to the chair and look at the audience, their body language is threatening and attacking the audience. They're looking at the audience. They're either lecturing the audience or they're non-verbally attacking the audience. That's why you always direct your comments to the chair. People see your back, they sit and listen to what you're saying. As soon as you turn around and you face that audience, you've lost control over your debate, you've lost control over your message. People start reacting emotionally to your body language instead of listening to what you're trying to tell them. So it's very important, direct your remarks to and through the chair. The chair should repeat the motion before you take the vote. Again, my favorite example is from my high school students preparing for parliamentary competition. They had a motion, I move to buy a blue couch. And during the debate, there's a lot of discussion about should we buy a blue couch, should we buy a blue chair, should we buy a whole ensemble, should we redo the room? And the chair mistakenly said, the question is on the adoption to buy a blue chair. Those in favor say aye, aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. And what did they do? Did they buy a blue couch or did they buy a blue chair? They bought a blue chair because that is the way the question was stated immediately before the vote. So it's very important, if the presiding officer misstates the motion, you interrupt them. You say, parliamentary inquiry. Could the chair please restate the motion correctly? Point of order, the chair needs to restate the motion correctly. I object. The chair did not state the motion correctly. Whatever strength you need to make sure that the way the chair states the motion immediately before you vote is the motion that you're voting on. Sometimes they change it intentionally. Sometimes it's by mistake. Most school boards, I don't notice making that mistake as often as county commissioners and city commissioners. Whoever's presiding has a really bad habit of changing the motion based upon what is said in debate. That's something that's very important. Those in favor say aye, those opposed say no. It's not ayes and nays, it's ayes and no. people say, why do you not say those in favor of the motion, say yes? And if you have a whole bunch of people saying yes, it sounds like a hiss. So it's aye, and those opposed say no. And then the chair announces the result of the vote. This is another step that is often skipped. The ayes have it, the motion is adopted. We will whatever. Or the noes have it and the motion is lost. This helps the person during the minutes know exactly what to put in the minutes so there's no discrepancy over what happened. There are times where the ayes might have it and the chair might announce the noes have it. If you're not sure the outcome, you say division. Because you guys count your votes and you only have 5 people, it's usually not an issue.
Can we have a comment from our attorney, please?
This is the attorney, I'm sorry. This is
Go ahead.
just 2 matters that were mentioned earlier, and I didn't want to blurt anything out because I wanted to make absolutely sure. And I double-checked in the Government in the Sunshine Manual, which you may be familiar with, generated by Pat Gleason at the Attorney General's office and the First Amendment Foundation. One question was right of the public to participate in terms of the public comment section under statute. And
Right.
I see that as a bifurcated issue. The original Sunshine Act provided, and this is out of the manual, that the public was entitled to attend when the public business is done by the board. But there had not been originally provision for members of the public to actually be given a statutory right to speak. The amendment and the creation of 286-0114 says members of the public shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard on a proposition before a board or commission. And the term proposition isn't defined. Generally, at least under the statute, as Ms. Berenborg said, it's interpreted to mean an official agended item. Now, having said that, in light of what Ms. Rosario said, we do have Article 1, Section, and this is not in the Government in the Sunshine Manual. This is just an underlying organic question. Article 1, Section 24 of the Florida Constitution gives members of the public the right to petition the government. And essentially, it's always been my position, regardless of what that statute provides, that the Constitution gives them the right to speak on issues that may generally be issues of the school board. So that's, you know, I certainly have always taken the position that public comment is allowed by the Constitution, if not expressly by the statute. The other question, because I was pretty sure about this, is 286-012 is the provision about member votes. And what it specifically says is that a member who is present cannot abstain except as authorized in 286-012, and cites to an opinion of the Attorney General that states failure of a member to vote does not render a voted matter invalid if a quorum is present and the required number of affirmative votes have been cast by the voting members. There is also listed an opinion of the Attorney General that states, and this is the final thing I'll just say because we were asking about that, nothing in the language of Section 286-012 indicates a member who temporarily absents himself from the dais but is present in the meeting room during a vote should be recorded as an affirmative vote. you know, so basically the position, at least of the Attorney General, is that while it is deemed to be a general standard that if you don't vote, you're put down as a yes, 286.012 by statute, basically, the goal of the legislature there was to compel you to vote unless you have an exemption not to. So just for
Right.
what it's worth. And sorry for
Okay.
taking it out of order. I just wanted to make sure on both of those points that, you know, I had gone back
Yes.
in the Government and the Sunshine Manual and
So if someone
confirmed.
wants to abstain, they're not allowed to abstain unless they have a reason to abstain, which means they have to vote, which means you can force them to vote. Is that what you're saying?
That is what the Government and the Sunshine Manual reflects two Attorney General opinions is saying.
Yeah. And the thing about public comment, I mean, that's in, you know, sometimes Roberts is in sync with statutes and sometimes it's not. Public comment, Roberts says, Robert's Rules of Order, only members have the right to attend a meeting. That's a basic premise. If you don't belong to an organization, you don't have the right to attend that meeting. Now, the statute supersedes what Roberts says, and Roberts says the general public has a right to attend school board meetings, and the statutes say that owners in a condo have the right to attend condo board member meetings. But the board members have the right, according to statute, I think, because I'm not going to interpret, the statutes give the board the right to determine when they speak and how long they speak, because the meeting is a member of the school board members. It's not a meeting of the public. And a condo meeting is a meeting of this condo board of directors, not a meeting of the owners. So the owners or the board members have the right to determine who speaks when for what. And that's in accordance with what Robert says. So in that case, you know, they kind of work hand in hand. The only time I find that there's a conflict between Roberts and the statutes and the attorneys is, okay, the statutes supersede Roberts. So nothing in Roberts can conflict with what the statutes say. Whatever the government says is the way that it is, period. It's an interpretation. Attorneys are trained to interpret statutes and interpret situations and dissect what is applicable and what is not applicable. And a basic decision-making thing is the doctrine of stare decisis. You make decisions based upon prior decisions that were made. In parliamentary procedure, it's a little bit different because you have rules that were adopted. And because you ignore a certain rule previously, doesn't mean it's okay to ignore that rule at this meeting. If you have something that happened previously and you let it go, and we can go back to that example where the chair wants something to be, I forgot if it's heard or not heard, but whatever. And you let it go and you let that happen. At the next meeting, because the chair allowed that to happen at the last meeting, does not set precedent according to Roberts for that same mistake to happen at this meeting. If it's a rule, there's a rule and you follow the rule. And if you didn't enforce the rule last time, does not prevent you from enforcing that rule this time. And basically, that's the only thing I see that's different. And again, I always defer to the attorney because it's the attorney that is going to defend you. And it's the attorney that's giving you legal advice. So if you ever have a conflict with what a parliamentarian says and the attorney, go by what the attorney says. Because the parliamentarian is not going to be in court by your side to defend you. So, okay, these 6 steps in handling a motion. The first 2 is you obtain recognition before you make a motion. The other 6 steps are very, very important, so you know what is being debated and what is being voted on and what the outcome is. A lot of times when organizations have messy meetings, it's because they're not following these 6 steps. Okay, again, I don't want to make you into parliamentarians, but I do think it's helpful for you to have a good basic understanding of the different motions that are available in Roberts to help you when you conduct your meetings. You don't have to memorize these terms. It just lets you understand the basic structure of motions in Roberts. You have a main motion. This is a motion that introduces business to the assembly. Sometimes if it's on the agenda, the chair will assume the motion has been made. In other school boards, they go through the process of having a member make a motion and having it seconded. There's 2 types of motions. You have a main motion, which is any motion made when no motion is pending. It's a main motion. If you already have a main motion pending, any other motion is considered a secondary motion. So secondary motions are made when another motion is already pending. The best example is, go back to our motion to buy a blue couch. Someone can say move to amend to strike out blue and insert red. The motion to buy a blue couch would be the main motion. And the motion to strike out blue and insert red would be the secondary motion. And in that case, it's a motion to amend. Main motion, this chart, I think they printed this for you all. It's in color. Because again, when you preside, it's not easy. If it's green, the motion is debatable. If the motion is not green, it's not debatable. The motion is red, it requires a 2/3 vote. Again, we live in a democracy where decisions are made by majority vote. The only time you have something by a 2/3 vote is if it takes away your right. Your right to debate, to limit debates, 2/3 vote. Amend bylaws notice for other types of groups is usually a 2/3 vote because you're changing something a majority adopted, or if a rule requires a 2/3 vote. Blue, the chair decides, and if there's an asterisk, we'll talk about that at the end. So you have a motion to postpone indefinitely. If a motion is made and you don't want to take a direct vote on that motion because it would be embarrassing, because you don't want to risk it being adopted, but you want to find out the strength of the opposition, you can make the motion to postpone indefinitely. The motion to postpone indefinitely is adopted. That motion cannot come up again during that same session. So it's an easy way to get rid of a motion. Sometimes with the press, if you vote yes, to say, oh, the school board did this. And if you vote no, it's like, oh, the school board did that. If you want to avoid that, you just say motion postponed indefinitely. It means you don't take a vote on the motion, it just goes away. Motion to amend is the most common motion. I know you guys know how to make a motion to amend. I move to strike out blue, insert red. I move to add words at the end of a sentence. I move to strike out words in the middle of a sentence. Motion to commit or refer. I move to refer the motion to the advisory committee to report back, or to the superintendent to report back at the next meeting. Motion to postpone to definite time. I move to postpone this motion to later at this meeting or until the next meeting. Limit or extend limits of debate is self-evident. Previous question is a motion to close debate, to stop debate. And lay on the table is a motion that's probably the most misused motion. If I have a client and they make the motion lay on the table and they misuse it, I usually don't make a big to-do about it because the motion, Roberts is not a weapon, it's a shield. You're supposed to lay a motion on the table when something more urgent comes up that has to be taken care of right away. If you lay a motion on the table, you have to make a motion to take it from the table. If you don't, it dies and it has to be made again. Legislatures use the motion to lay on the table. That's where a lot of people get it and use it. I was a parliamentarian for advisory board down in Broward County one time, parliamentarian, and someone made a motion to lay the main motion on the table until after the committee makes a recommendation. And I tried to explain to them that that was a motion to refer to a committee or motion to postpone indefinite time. And they're like, we can do whatever we want to do. And you know what? We live in America, and guess what? We can do whatever we want to do as long as the majority votes to do it. So it's like, go ahead, lay it on the table until later. And the problem with that is it only requires a majority vote, and it's not debatable. So when you make the motion to lay on the table and it's seconded, you took away the right to debate, and it's only a majority vote. So all these motions, they're called subsidiary motions. They concern the main motion. If you look at all these motions individually, they all concern the main motion. The next motions are called privileged motions. When you look at these motions, you see they concern the business of the assembly. We already talked about, I call for the orders of the day. Raise a question of privilege. That would have applied to today. There's an echo, I can't hear. Could someone please, fix the echo? That would have been a rise to question of privilege. A motion to recess, about. Adjourn, motion to adjourn. The motion to fix the time to which to adjourn. This is probably not a motion the school board would use, but it's available. It means we don't have enough time today or tonight to do what has to be taken care of today or tonight. I move that when we adjourn today, we adjourn to meet until another time, either at the call of the chair, or you can name a specified time and place. If you adopt the motion to fix the time to which to adjourn, it does not adjourn this meeting. You continue with this meeting, but when you do adjourn, you say this meeting is adjourned until tomorrow at 10 o'clock a.m., whatever the fixed time was to which to adjourn is. These are called ranking motions, meaning they have to be made in a specific rank. If you have a motion pending to postpone to a definite time, only motions higher in rank are in order, not anything lower in rank. So if you have a motion, postpone the motion to the next meeting, it's not in order to make the motion to amend the main motion. That's just to keep focused on one thing at a time. It's a parliamentary term. The attorney and presiding officer, and members, if you print this page out, you have it in front of you. Incidental motions relate to procedure. If you look at these motions, point of order, we talked about. Appeal, you just say, I appeal from the decision of the chair. I move to suspend the rules and take out something out of order on the agenda. A lot of times the chair will do it by unanimous consent. There's no objection, we'll take care of this at this time. Someone says, I object, it only means you take a vote. Objection to consideration of a question probably doesn't come up because everything has to be noticed. Division of the assembly, if there's a vote, and again, because you take a roll call vote, you wouldn't have it, but if it's a voice vote in another group and you're not sure the outcome, all you have to do is say division, and it forces the chair to retake the vote by rising vote. Considered by paragraph of seriatim, I doubt if you guys would do that one. Motions relating to nominations, voting in the polls. You have your nominations when you elect your officers in your organizational meeting. Requests and inquiries include a request to be excused from a duty, a parliamentary inquiry. I have a question about parliamentary procedure. Request for information. I have a request for additional information. Request for permission to withdraw or modify a motion. Once it's stated by the chair, an individual can't take the motion away from the other member's consideration. You have to get permission to withdraw it. Request to read papers or any other privilege. It's a request to be granted by the members. The last class is motions that bring a question again before the assembly. These are main motions, which means they can only be made when no other motion is pending. You have take from the table. I move to rescind a motion previously adopted. or a move to amend something previously adopted, motion to discharge a committee, which you probably don't do, and the motion to reconsider. This motion to reconsider can only be made at the same meeting. So when you take a vote on a motion and some new information comes up, and it has to be made by a person who voted on the prevailing side. And I don't know if you would use that motion that much either. So these are the 5 classes of motions. These are all the motions in the book. You might say, well, what's this 10, 11, 12? These are the sections in Roberts. Section 10 deals with main motions. Section 11 deals with postpone indefinitely. In the back of the book, there's a table that tells you what the rules are, but the rules, if you look at this chart, if it's green, it's debatable. If it's not green, it's not debatable. If it's red, it's a 2/3 vote. You see there's only 4 red motions. Everything else is majority vote. We live in democracy. So any questions about all these motions? Yes.
Any questions, board members?
Someone raised their hand.
Ms. Berenborg?
Yeah, you have something written below there that says, "My pearls are classy, pretty lady, can Robert race a Ferrari?" What is that?
Oh, that's just the mnemonics for a parliamentarian to remember the sequence of 13 ranking motions.
Okay,
My pearls are classy, pretty lady, can Robert race a Ferrari? That's to help you remember the rank. And, you know, in most meetings, if there's a motion to recess pending, no one's going to make a motion to amend the main motion while the motion to recess is pending. I mean, it just kind of sort of naturally happens, but when you're parliamentarian, you have to know the correct rank, and that's how we remember that.
okay, thank you.
Any other comments, questions, board members? It's hard to see. Thank you.
Most of these motions, the words to make them are the words for the motion. The only one that isn't is previous question. And if you say I move to close debate, it means the same as I move the previous question. If you have a motion to limit debate to 20 minutes, at the end of 20 minutes, you immediately proceed to take a vote on all pending motions.
Ms. Proctor, is previous question, you could also use call the question?
I didn't hear that.
Can you use call the question instead of previous question?
When you say I call the question, it requires a second. So if you say I call the question, you need a second.
Yes, yes.
And you're supposed to take a 2/3 vote to stop debate. When you call the question, that doesn't mean to immediately proceed to vote on the main motion. That just means you
And
want to
debate.
vote to stop debate. And that's a 2/3 vote to stop debate.
Correct.
And that's something a lot of people do improperly. And some school boards actually adopt a rule. They don't adopt Roberts, and they adopt a rule that if any member says, I call the question, you immediately take a vote without any further debate. As a parliamentarian, I would not recommend that you do that, because debate is good, because it's good to hear what other people have to say. If you listen to what people have to say in debate, it helps you form motions that lead to compromise instead of problems. It's when you don't allow debate that you tend to have your most problems.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I see a hand raised.
I have a question, thank you. Regarding the calling of the question, requiring a second and then a vote of 2/3 of the board, should there be discussion, or do you go immediately into the 2/3 vote?
Debate stops.
Is it green?
Is it
No.
green on,
Is it green? Is previous question green?
I can't see it. I don't see where it
Can't
is.
see. The answer is no. I'm sorry.
It's
No.
question. Okay, so no
Yeah.
debate, no
No
discussion.
debate, yeah. Only the green motions are debatable. The others are not debatable. If you look at this, most motions are not debatable. The only thing debatable is your main motion, and, postpone definitely, amend, commit, postpone definite time. Those 5 motions, and, I teach. I do
Okay.
a lot of teaching. And, if you use your hands, we're adults, we can use our hands, use our fingers to count, right? Main motion, postpone indefinitely, amend, refer, postpone indefinite time, 5 motions. Those 5 motions on your left hand are debatable. All the other motions are not debatable.
Okay.
And the only ones that require 2/3 vote are the ones that take away your rights.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm glad you did ask that question because, I see a lot of school board meetings on YouTube and some of them are so sad. And this one school board meeting, someone made a motion. Nobody seconded the motion. The chair was ready to wait 10 minutes for someone to finally say second. Nobody would say second. So they asked the attorney, how long do we have to wait for someone to second the motion? And he's like, well, there's no real rule pertaining to that. So someone was smart enough to say, I move that we proceed to the agenda. I proceed with the agenda items, next item of business, which was good, and it was seconded. But that motion to proceed is an incidental motion. It relates to procedure. It's not debatable. And they debated it. And the fact that they debated an undebatable motion got them into more trouble than anything else did. And the meeting quickly just went downhill. So yes, if motion's not debatable, don't debate it.
Okay, and then the other question about a proposition, which was mentioned earlier, since there is no clear definition on what is a proposition, or a proposition that comes before the board, or a proposition that the board entertains. The general understanding is a proposition is an item of which the board is going to take action. So that would either be through consent or action item.
Okay, in Roberts, and I love technology. It's on my cell phone, it's on my computer, it's in Kindle. A proposition is a motion to take action.
Okay.
That's Robert's definition of proposition is a motion to take action. I move to.
Okay.
So I know that's not a statute, but Robert says a proposition is a motion to take action.
Okay.
So any other questions? Go ahead.
Sorry. So then with that being said, and maybe our attorney can kind of chime in here, then technically discussions are not actionable. Discussions are just discussion. We're just talking about a particular item like we would at a workshop. Discussions are bringing things up where we talk about or give information or receive information on a particular item, but we're not taking formal action. So understanding these, it's my belief that a discussion item is not a proposition, and then therefore would not be open for the need to allow the public to provide input on discussion items. Now, I mention this because in the past, we have never had an opportunity. Again, that's only in the most recent times, I guess, within maybe a year, where the chair actually has allowed anyone to talk about anything on the agenda. But what our policy says is that you can only talk about an item that is on the printed, posted agenda. And so so then somehow or another, some of those items, some people are now talking even to discussion items. So putting all of this together, it's my understanding that, and don't get me wrong, I'm, pro First Amendment all the way, But like you said, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. And if we're going to be consistent, we need to be consistent. So,
Yeah, Robert's solution to your problem would be for someone to make a motion, I move that, and again, you gotta run this by the attorney. I move that public input be limited to action items on the agenda. Okay, now that's a motion you make, it's seconded, you guys vote what you want to do. People might say, no, we don't want to, we want to open it up to anything and everything. Other people might say, well, that's a good idea, it's only what was noticed that can be discussed by the general public, because how's the general public going to know about it if it's not noticed?
Right.
So you make a motion to have whatever rule you want to have. The majority of you guys vote to implement that rule, and then you follow that rule.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, Roberts is like, you are a free entity to do whatever you want to do. As long as you make a motion to do it, it's seconded, and the majority votes to do it.
Thank you.
And so it's up to you guys to decide how you want to handle your meetings. And maybe you want to allow just general discussion. I mean, it's up to you guys. It's your meeting. And I think that's a basic premise of all of this. Robert says it's your meeting. You decide what you want to do and what procedures you want to follow. So the last part of this is what if situations, possibilities, action. Like how do you guys get an item on the agenda? What do you guys have to do?
Well, Dr. Moore, do you want to talk about that? Chair and
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the protocols state that if a board member would like an item on the agenda, they just email it to the secretary and myself 8 days prior to the posting of the agenda.
Okay. And how much notice is required by law for any item on the agenda?
Well, aren't you want to race? Let's see who can get there first. 7 days.
By
7
law,
days.
by law would be sunshine, that'd be absent an emergency, 48 hours. But
Okay,
the
so if it's
policy is
emergency, it's
7.
8 hours, and other than that, it's 5 days?
7 days is what
7
the
days.
protocol is, 7 days is what the typical policy is. 48 hours absent emergency is typically a sunshine issue, that you're given 48 hours. And for what it's worth, and I think since I've been working here, we have actually added some, at least one action item the day of, and was, as I recall, done consistently with a majority vote. I don't, if I remember correctly, at the end of the day.
Right. But yeah, and that's a good way to handle anything. If you're not sure of something, just make a motion and take the vote. I mean, it's your meeting. I would encourage you to, no, I'm not going to say that. I'm not political. I don't, whatever you want to do, you want to do. I was going to say I would encourage you to limit it to action items, because if you don't limit it to action items, we can get a lot of people, crazy people say a lot of crazy things. Depending on the community, some communities, want to allow other things, and they do so. But that's up to the school board what they will and won't allow. It's your organization. So does anyone have any other situations or questions that they would like to ask? I mean, have you learned anything? Is there something new and different? Does this just make you more comfortable with what you've already been doing?
If it's good information, I really appreciate it. Anyone else? Any comments?
No, thank you.
And this is your one chance to consult with a professional registered parliamentarian about Robert's Rules of Order.
I was just going to add that I think this was a very helpful discussion, probably for everybody. Some of you,
Ms. Proctor, I've worked with Mr. Lawton, Henry Lawton. Do you know him?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I was just asking Ms. Proctor a question. I've worked with Henry Lawton. He's a certified parliamentarian. Do you know him?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, he's a good guy. Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Rosario.
Okay, so I thank you for this information, Barbara. It's probably like the second time, maybe the third time that I have had a similar training by you, and every time I walk away with something different and incredibly eye-opening. I've been a board member now in my second term, and only recently have I realized how important it is for us to follow Robert's rules. And I say recently, in the last, couple of years, year or two. And you are right. When we follow the rules, they should be consistent. We have had times on our board where there has been bullying in certain positions. And I don't mean, directly attacking. It could be very indirect through the use of one's position. And I'm glad that you have brought light to the fact that this board is a board collective. We are a board corporate. We make decisions together. One member does not overrule or take control over the entire meeting just because of their position. And they have to, and for all of us to have equal voice, even if we disagree with each other, for all of us to have equal voice and respect of the position that we hold is very important. So I've advocated for us to have this training for quite a while. It's been long coming, and so I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that we were able to do this. If we have any questions in the future, would we be able to, is there a way that we can reach out to you? If we have any specific questions, like what is your recommendation on how you handle these trainings with boards and then having future follow-up or something like that?
Yeah, well, it depends on, if you have a question regarding procedure, the first person you should always consult with is your attorney. Now, you have to understand what I said previously is you have rules, you've adopted your rules, you need to follow your own rules. It's up to each individual board member to say point of order or I object. And it is important, if one person is doing something and it's not right, there's 4 others of you, then you kind of need to stand together and say, it doesn't matter if you're voting yes or no on the motion, you have to follow proper procedure. And if you follow proper procedure, then theoretically you're going to arrive at the best decision. It's when you don't follow proper procedure and someone doesn't want to follow Roberts, typically it's because they want to push through their own agenda or do something, which is why they want to skip the right procedure. And it's the same like in your schools and your classrooms. If one person is bullying somebody and everyone just stands around and watches and lets it happen, everybody's guilty. You have to band together and work together to protect the individual, because sometimes the individual might be one person and next time it might be someone different. And it's always easiest to pick on the presiding officer. Because they're the most vocal and they're the most ones out front. And it's very easy to pick on them. Sometimes they're the bully and sometimes they're the victim. So you just need to speak up.
And then my last question is about minutes. So I've had a little note here, which I'm kind of trying to find out where it is, but I do know that there is a specific procedure to follow when, regarding Robert's rules and taking minutes, and if minutes need to be amended. where you can write in, you never want to change the original minutes. You always want to make a margin note of what that amendment would be and who is amending it and why. Can you talk a little bit about minutes with regard to Robert's rules and what we should know moving forward?
Okay, it's my understanding that the superintendent prepares the minutes of the meeting.
We have a separate,
Okay, whatever.
he's
Right.
responsible for them, yes.
Okay. The minutes should contain only the action that is done, the motions that are made and what happens to the motions. You should not include debate in the minutes. At the beginning of the meetings, and I wasn't paying attention to see if you guys approve your minutes.
Yes.
We do.
You see,
Yes.
okay, so the chair would say the minutes were distributed. Are there any corrections? There being none, the minutes are approved as distributed. Or if there are corrections, the chair would say so-and-so will correct the minutes. Are there any further corrections? There being none, the minutes are approved as corrected. And that's the end of the minutes for that meeting right then and there. At a later time, at another meeting, if you discover there's something in the minutes that need to be corrected, you make a motion during the meeting. I move to correct the minutes of the blah, blah, blah meeting by inserting, deleting, whatever it is. And if that motion to correct the minutes is adopted, yes, you would write it in the margins so that you know what that the correction was made. And it's a motion to amend something previously adopted. And that's the one that had the asterisk. And I didn't tell you about the asterisk. I told you I would and I didn't. The asterisk means if you give notice, the motion requires a majority vote. If you do not give notice, the motion requires a 2/3 vote. So in an ordinary society, if you had a motion to amend the minutes previously adopted, it would be a 2/3 vote unless you gave notice that you're going to make that motion in the notice of the meeting. And again, if it's voted yes, you would write in the margins how the minutes were corrected.
Okay, so I'm sorry, we have an item coming before us tonight, which are amended minutes. They were previously adopted, and then they were just from our last meeting amended, correctly amended to whatever the correction needed to be. They're going to come to us tonight. They're on tonight's consent agenda. But what I'm hearing from you is that these amended minutes would need to be voted on with a 2/3 vote.
Which would be.
Was it noticed in the
Yes.
agenda? Okay, well, if it was noticed, it's only majority vote. Because it was noticed, it's majority vote.
So just majority, not 2/3.
It was part of the notice. The
Right.
notice that went out with the meeting, with the agenda, yeah, it'd only be a majority vote because it had notice.
Okay.
Um,
So just be regular.
yeah.
And thank you. And
All right. But
may,
any other
and I
time-
actually have a
Little bit of-
procedural question following on Ms. Rosario's. Because here's the circumstances, and there's a wrinkle, actually there are two, because I've been chewing on
We're
some.
talking about the minutes? We're talking
Yeah,
about
about the minutes, but I'm glad that that Ms. Rosario opened this up, because we want to make sure that it is accurately reflected. So step one, February 28th of 2022, there's a vote that's reflected as a 4-1 vote, as I understand it, or a 3-2 vote that was actually a 4-1 vote. It then comes back and is, as I understand it, was in the consent agenda to reflect it to 4-1, but there's a discrepancy as to exactly how that was reflected. And so there are two things that I want to ask, because I have no intention here except to make sure our minutes are accurately reflected, whatever your answer is. So the corrected minutes, which showed 4-1, and as I understand, in one version showed that the correction, and in another version did not, were on the consent agenda. The consent agenda was passed by consent, by acclamation. 5-0. Ms. Rosario was coming in from the airport at the same meeting, moved to have that actually pulled from the consent agenda. And so, and so my first question was actually related to that particular motion, which I thought was a motion to reconsider, because you're basically, or amend, however you want to frame it, the consent agenda in order to open up the issue. And if I'm wrong on that motion, I would absolutely stand here and ask you what the appropriate motion would be. I mean, I would figure either an amendment or reconsideration first of what had already been adopted 5-0. And so how would you have handled that?
Well,
Okay, it's a little,
Barbara, just to clarify, just to bring clarity, what I actually said was that I make a motion to amend something previously adopted.
Which were the orders of the day.
okay, I'm a little confused because, okay, let's go back to where, okay, the minutes say 3-2 and they should have said 4-1.
Right.
Okay, what does the request to have something pulled from the consent agenda have anything to do with that?
Because the correction that was attempted was on the consent agenda at our last meeting.
Okay, so the consent agenda included a motion to correct the minutes to strike out 3-2 and insert 4-1.
Basically, yes, but there was, and I think we would agree, there is ambiguity as to what the form that was in the public minutes showed. But that was the intent. It was in the consent agenda. And the consent agenda, but there was
Okay,
not.
so if it was part of the consent agenda and consent agenda was adopted, that amendment would have been done, wouldn't it?
You would think.
No, it would have been, but it wasn't actually done. So the minutes weren't, I made a motion to amend something previously adopted, which in this
Right,
case
the
was
minutes.
previous minutes because they weren't actually changed.
So you made a motion to amend the minutes previously adopted to strike out 3-2 and insert 4-1.
Right, that was the attempt. It got shut down
Well,
because it wasn't
well,
made
here's-
in a timely manner.
And here's the question, just so, and because it's, I don't think there's any dispute, because I think we're just trying, because I actually still have another question to further
Okay,
Ms.
let's
Rosario's.
go back to that one. Okay, if that motion was on the consent agenda for the last meeting and the consent agenda was adopted, the minutes of the last meeting would reflect that that motion to amend something previously adopted was adopted as part of the consent agenda.
There you go.
Well, not
Yes.
really, because my motion was shot down and it was accepted because it wasn't done in a timely manner. Or it
I
wasn't
thought you
done-
said it was on the consent agenda.
There you go.
It was on the consent agenda as minutes, as amended minutes, but they actually weren't amended. So I was bringing it up because it was previously adopted, and I was trying to bring it forward to clarify that it wasn't corrected. It needed to be corrected and changed. And basically what I was trying to say was, here's the reason. When it was changed, the original minutes were actually completely altered. So what I was bringing forward was, it was previously adopted, but wait a minute, they weren't supposed to be completely altered. It was supposed to have, memos in the margin to indicate what needs to be amended. So I was bringing up to actually fix the amended motion, the amended minutes, so that they could be corrected. But two board members actually said, no, you didn't do it in the proper manner. And so therefore it shouldn't have been it wasn't accepted. My motion to amend the minutes wasn't accepted. Then the board said, but superintendent, you'll make sure to change the minutes, correct? And he said, yes.
That's not
So
what was said. That
essentially,
is not
my
what was
motion
said.
was shut down, but he took her direction to change the minutes anyway. So tonight, we have the amended minutes, and I just want to make sure that we have it correctly.
And
Okay, so the motion is to amend the minutes to correctly reflect that 3-2 was struck out and 4-1 was inserted.
which is basically my understanding, and I'm looking at the secretary. It was, what she prepared was actually a standard strike through and delete. And I just want to make sure that what Ms. Rosario wanted was consistent with the unique format for the particular circumstance, which is, again, making the notation to the original item in the minutes.
Okay,
But-
and my
but-
question would be, okay, attorneys use the term redlined, where you show something was struck out and something was inserted.
And that's why I, ultimately, the question, I don't have a problem with it, whether it was reopened. What I understood in debate, and again, the board speaks for the board, is a couple of people said, I want to see this if you want to bring it back. And, and, what I'm concerned about is, okay, if we do it tonight, and it's going to be with the notations, we don't have a format that allows it in the margin. We have a format that has it as 2 footnotes, and then at the bottom, it explains the change without changing the original text. But my
I
other,
think if you have a footnote, when you have like a little number 1 or a little asterisk or something,
we have
I mean,
we
when
have
you have a Word
footnotes.
document, you have a footnote, you note the footnote in the text.
It's in the
And,
text as well. It says FN1 and FN2 and the points in the text.
Yeah.
But
But the only comment I have to say, if there's any kind of concern whatsoever, perhaps you should be pulled from the consent agenda and have a separate vote so that today's minutes reflect that the minutes were properly amended by striking out 3-2 and inserting 4-1.
Well, then I ask the other question, though, if I may, because I
Sure.
want to make sure that the record is accurate. And if we were to do that, then, because we would then still have the one from the last meeting?
Yeah, I mean-
Do we do a request to amend, a motion to amend that which was adopted within that consent agenda?
I would put it more in an affirmative voice. The consent agenda, if I understand you correctly, the consent agenda last time included a motion to amend the minutes previously adopted to strike out 3-2 and insert 4-1. That was adopted as part of the consent agenda. The concern is the actual format or notation that the correction was made was not clear. I mean, if they just took out 3-2 and said 4-1, it didn't reflect any correction. That is what I mean as being unclear. So maybe tonight's motion should be just a request to view the format to ensure its accuracy. I mean, that'd be making a motion to take action in an affirmative statement. Because you're right, you already voted to correct the minutes. You just need to make sure that they were done, the correction was done properly.
So one of the, in Robert's rules, I think it's 48, section 48.4, 48.15, and I believe in the brief, it's page 153. It actually says that the secretary does not actually alter the content of the original minutes, but may make a marginal notation indicating the corrected text or referring to the minutes of the meeting in which the correction was adopted. So if
And
the secretary
that is why I suggested the redlining format that attorneys use to amend documents, because it would show 3-2 being struck out, and it would show 4-1 being inserted as being underlined. And if you wanted to add a little asterisk or a footnote, and then refer at the bottom that motion to amend the minutes previously adopted was adopted at this meeting to strike out 3-2 and insert 4-1, you're covered. The issue that we're having is back in the day, you had handwritten journals. And people would put a little circle and an X in the margins. Well, today's world, we don't have handwritten journals. Attorneys use the red line formatting, and you can use asterisks and footnotes to do that. And then your backup is the existing minutes are going to show that that motion to amend the minutes previously adopted was voted on yes at the last meeting. That should be in the minutes as well. So you have it in two different places.
Okay, any more comments or questions?
Does that help clarify things, or things are still muddy?
Any other comments or questions? Any general questions or comments for board members? Our attorney, Dr. Moore, any other questions or comments? Okay, Ms. Proctor, we would really like to thank you for your time today. It was great information, and we thank you for spending time with us.
Yeah. And if you do have any questions concerning basic procedure that doesn't require, you know, a lot of research, interpretation of statutes or anything, I don't know what school board protocols are. I mean, I'm okay if you send me emails, but if you want it from the whole school board, it probably has to be more official. But I'm here as an advocate for parliamentary procedure, following proper procedure, adopting Robert's Rules of Order, and if you don't like what Roberts says, adopt special rules of order to supersede Roberts.
Okay, at this time, I take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Okay. Anyone else? Any discussion? Okay, at this time, again, thank you,
No discussion.
Ms. Proctor. No discussion. We will adjourn right now at 3:38. Appreciate your time.